Hey, Taylor Elwood here, your mad scientist and magical experimenter. And if you're watching this video on YouTube, I want to point you to the link below the video to the blog post where this video is featured so that you can read the rest of the content, which is really about how magic works. And what I want to talk about today is why it's important to use what's relevant to you in your magical work. What I see happen in a lot of for a lot of people who practice magic is they'll hit a situation where they'll say, you know, I've read these books and I have to draw from this ancient tradition, or I have to use these tools, or I have to work with these deities because these books said so, or because this teacher said so, or whatever else. And on the one hand, if you genuinely feel drawn to it, I say go for it. You know, if you feel drawn to something, work with it. But on the other hand, if you don't feel drawn to it, I think that is actually one of the worst things you can do for yourself as a magician. And so one of the suggestions that I make to people when I'm working with them or teaching them magic or anything else is to use what's relevant to them. Use what makes sense to them. Use what's meaningful to them. Now, some people will say, well, the reason we use ancient traditions is because there's this long history of people working with magic in this particular context. There's this established energy there, and that's why people should work with it. And those are good reasons to use. But I think that when we sacrifice what is relevant and meaningful to us just to work with something because it's been around for a long time, we're actually doing ourselves and whatever that is, a disservice. For myself, I do a lot of work with pop culture magic, and the reason I do a lot of work with pop culture magic is because pop culture is what I resonate with. I've grown up with pop culture. Pop culture makes sense to me. It speaks to me in a way that more ancient traditions / mythologies, what have you, doesn't really speak to me. So trying to do magic with something that doesn't really speak to me, trying to force a connection, doesn't work very well. When we look at how magic works, I think a key thing that many instructors are missing out on, and many people just in general are missing out on, is that what makes magic work isn't just the spirits or anything else. It's also you. And it's what you bring to the equation, and it's what makes sense and is meaningful to you. And so you want to use what is meaningful to you in your magical work, because that's what's going to speak to the depth of your spiritual practice. That's what's going to help you achieve a solid understanding and recognition of where you want to go with your spiritual practice. And when we learn this about magic, and when we truly recognize that magic is in part about working with something that's relevant to you, then it allows us to personalize our magical work, and it allows us to take the structures of magic and apply them to something that has meaning to us. And really, when we look at magic, what we discover is that magical work is that if you look at your average magical ritual working your spell, a lot of what's there is ultimately optional. It's portrayed as being necessary, but it's optional. And the reason why is because you can switch out what doesn't work for you and put in what does. And I know for some people that's going to sound blasphemous, like how dare you, you know, like why would you do that? But the fact of the matter is, why wouldn't you? As a magical experimenter, I think it's really important to open ourselves up to fully figuring out how magic works. Don't just take the word of someone else or a book that you've read or whatever else. You know, really open yourself up and explore and experiment and see what happens. If you feel drawn to work with some type of pop culture, why not take that and apply it to the magical practices you already know? For example, if you're a Wiccan or something like that, you know you already have a foundation, a grounding in how magic is practiced through that particular perspective or discipline. Why not take your pop culture and apply that to it and see what happens? The worst that's going to happen is nothing happens, and you discover, okay, it didn't work. The best thing that'll happen is you'll discover it does work, and that it makes a lot of sense to you. And then look at where you can go from there. So when I talk about relevance, that's what I'm really talking about, and that's why I think it's important to use what's relevant to us as opposed to just using, the latest popular spirit that's being talked about on the web, or going through the grimoire or going through the grimoires as faithfully as possible. Don't get me wrong. Again, if that's what you want to do, go for it. But I think that when we really look at our magical practice, we should really ask ourselves, why shouldn't we discover what else we can do with that magical practice? All right, so that's it, and I just wanted to share that thought with you. And again, if you want to read the article where this video is showing up in, check out the link below, and I'll talk to you later. Take care.